There's been a massive Splatoon tournament building up in the background. 8 of our best Western teams against 8 of Japan's in a double elimination bracket. How well are we gonna do? So we went 1-24 in games. It's definitely closer than the scoreboard would show you. In particular, Milky Way was 1 point off, winning both games in their set against the team that got second, which also, by the way, is a very cool and high placement for E-Leader. However, the West as a whole largely underperformed. Now, I think a lot of people know that Japan is generally better at comp Splatoon, but why? And is there a way to close that gap? We have a lot to get into. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's start with why does Japan have such a big advantage? Now, this first point is the majority of the reason, so I'm gonna get it out of the way. The game in Japan is much larger, like mainstream, competitive, all of it. The player base is multiple times larger at pretty much every level of play in terms of viewership, all of it. It is simply a bigger scene, and that means more players, more top players, more guides, more content, more strategy, more basically everything. They get better consistent practice against each other, they get better solo queue because of it, they have a game that's taken more seriously. Pretty self-explanatory. And there's more than that, because 2, they all speak the same language, which isn't as big of a barrier, but it does affect some regions, and more importantly, they're all in the same time zone. Our best players can be around 10 hours apart from each other. That means if they want to practice, it's scheduling at different parts of the day. Japan does not have this problem. They are around for a lot more of the day. That makes it a lot easier. So what if we just tried to play against them? Which leads us to problem number 3. We can't play against them. Peak hours for JP scrims are typically very early in the morning for North America, around 5 a.m., give or take a few hours. If you want to try to play their tournaments, they're often even earlier. And even if you get past both of those problems, oftentimes players in Japan don't want to scrim against Western players because they don't want to deal with the latency or lag associated, which, by the way, is a whole other thing that we have to deal with way worse than them. So even if you take the time out of your busy classes or job, you still might not even be able to play them. It's a giant hassle to even have the opportunity to practice against them. And you might be thinking, okay, but you can definitely get practice as an individual, right? You can just play solo ranked. And that brings me to number 4. The solo rank is also worse, by a lot. Even if you pick Takaroka, the region Japan is in, there is still regional matchmaking, which means you are still going to fight more against players who are not in Japan, your queue times are going to be significantly longer, and your lobbies are going to be worse. Players in Japan are getting more matches of better quality more often. It is not the same experience at all. We do have plenty of Western players who have grinded in JP solo, and while it's not unhelpful, acting like it's the same experience is just blatantly wrong. And finally, at number 5, experience against a larger variety of strategies. Obviously, the larger player base is the main factor here, meaning they're just going to have more people to specialize in specific weapons. The Western scene at a top level is actually pretty open to off-meta strategies and compositions, and we've seen that with a few teams like Moonlight and Hypernova, and I'm literally a Dreadringer player. However, again, they simply have more people that they're both playing against, and even more importantly, playing with and learning from. And this also applies outside of weapons to the tournament formats. They commonly play on zones only on all maps. If you look at SWS, you can see the E-Leader team getting constantly taken to Urchin, this super short range counterpick against them, and then as soon as you might feel bad for them, they banish the other team to Eeltail, one of the most long range favored stages. These drastically change the game plan and adaptations needed. Meanwhile, in the West, where we have our all modes on a small map list because that's what you need with that format, it becomes a joke that our teams are always going to counterpick to Inkblot and Mako for the past 7 years. Even if zones might seem like less because it's one mode, if you really learn how to play zones, you're gonna be good at the other modes too. And that does really show when their best teams beat ours in other modes anyway, when we practice it way more than them. My point is that they're prepared for a much wider variety of situations than we are. Even if our scene does try and make all these insane optimizations and improvements, and we try to get the scene better as much as possible, we're always going to be at a significant disadvantage. And if anything, the fact that we have teams as competitive as they are against Japan is kind of a positive. We should not stand this much of a chance. With that being said though, we can still learn from their gameplay. So let me show you 5 of the most important things to learn, though this obviously can't cover everything. And I want to say right here that the best teams in the game that we have don't necessarily not understand this. Oftentimes it's just executed to a higher level with Japan. But anyway, I think the most important thing I need to talk about to transfer these concepts is angles and pulling. This is the main concept that a lot of other things are based off of, but in Splatoon, typically, the wider of an angle of an attack you have in a fight, the better it is. Mainly because opponents can't look multiple places at once, and because they have a limited camera view and limited places they can look in, they can't see everything. Or even if you react to a flank and turn towards it, it's a lot harder to aim in a location that you are reacting to as you turn the camera and process that visual information versus somewhere that you're already looking. You're always trying to maximize the amount of places that they have to look to maintain those positions. And this applies even more on pushing and defending. If you retreat straight backwards, you might pull the other team into your side of the map, whereas trying to fight on the sides or at an angle might slow down their push into your terrain. This also applies on hold. The wiper's position is a lot stronger here, just keeping this side of the map, but when they extend, even if they're further forward, the angle of attack is narrower, and in this case, they get punished for it. Generally, Japan is just more consistent at playing to this compared to our teams. This extends into another difference, and this is one where I think we definitely struggle a lot more at implementing this, which is keeping fights off the zone. Now, a lot of our best teams are smart enough to realize that they should keep fights off zone during their holds, but I think the extent to which Japan takes advantage of this is a little bit higher. The best example I can think of is Moonlight's set on Barnacle. With about 20 points left remaining, Omega has a bubble on the zone, and with Mint and a pencil behind him, it's pretty threatening that they might be able to cap the zone. But the other team is completely undeterred by this. The wiper on their team, rather than holding the zone, gets an angle immediately and is constantly pressuring the backline. Meanwhile, for our scene, there will be a lot more of a panic to actually be able to hold the zone. And in fact, this was also a common trend, where I believe the objective had a lot more stress towards it. This clip happening to be another good example of that, because there is still plenty of points on the clock to win the team fight, but instead, they're trying to secure the cap here. A lot of Western teams also have more specials that are able to cap zone, such as running more of Strike and Booyah Bomb together, like in FT Wins Comp, which can also lead to specials being frequently put on the zone instead of in other locations. This kind of brings me to number 3, which is being scared of advantage / the objective. There were situations in which our teams got really good holds, but a lot of times these holds weren't taken advantage of as well as they could. Maybe it was the pressure of the setting that they were in, but there were definitely a lot of times where our teams could have pushed further up and taken those angles that I was talking about, but ended up getting caught in fights that didn't make as much sense. Mainly it could be trying to hold an area where you can't gain a lot of ground, or looking at the pencil player on defense rather than trying to focus on the aggressive players who will actually be taking space. The fourth one I want to talk about is going into the fact that fights are lasting more often. In this environment, entry specials are a lot less prioritized, and these teams are able to get into fights more quickly, especially with the most recent meta pushing support to be more aggressive, a trend that Japan is very used to. And so because of this, there are some special tools that I believe Japan prioritizes a little bit more, mainly options like Big Bubbler, Reef Slider, and Ultra Stamp. What makes these specials better in this environment is when you're in the middle of a fight, being able to snowball momentum to clean out the engagement is really important. Having specials where you can pop for clear momentum and instantly get your weapon back are very helpful. Whereas in the Western scene, we have a lot more specials that prioritize on taking space or trying to find your way in. That means in this environment where there are more and longer fights, we have more specials that are less useful and easily punished, whereas they have options that can extend momentum more easily, giving them an advantage in these fights. And finally, number 5. This is a point that I think a lot of our top level teams get, even if it's not executed as well, and is more a misconception lower down. But just because people are playing really fast doesn't mean they're dying a lot. And in particular, some of the shooter players, like especially the Zap on the E-Leader team, are very good at stalling out their life, playing to take and hold attention, but not die long enough for these slower Slayer weapons to find kills. Because if the kill heavy weapons like the S-Blast or Slosher go down early, it's a lot harder to find picks on the opposing team enough to keep the fight going. This doesn't mean it's only the support player taking advantage of this. In general, there will be someone with the attention on them who is doing a good job of trying to stay alive as long as possible while the other one goes for kills. All of these, and honestly more that I don't have enough time to get into here, contribute to Japan feeling faster and a bit more overwhelming. They are things that we can implement, but it takes a lot of time to get there, and more importantly, often is something that is easier to learn when you're being punished for these mistakes. And And due to the limited amount of top-level competition, often when our teams make these blunders, they're not getting punished for them as heavily, which is a big reason why they can't learn as fast as in Japan, where there's constantly far more people at that level able to punish those mistakes. Now, obviously, our team can learn from this, and we have before. Our best players already experiment a lot, we fight Japan as much as we can, and frankly, this isn't the first time we've had this conversation. Most of these teams have already dealt with this situation prior. It seems to just be newer for a lot of viewers since this hasn't happened a whole lot in Splatoon 3. With all that being said, can we catch up? Now, a lot of our players are going to say no, and frankly, that feels like it should be true, but I don't really like that answer. Do I think the odds are insanely low of winning a tournament of this scale against multiple of their best teams? Absolutely, but if I look back at the history of this game, there are times where we've beaten these teams in isolation. There are eras like Starburst where they did have those big runs, and even in the Splat World Series, Milky Way, composed of some players on Starburst, were just 1 point off on both of their games of beating the team that placed second in the event. Japan still plays the exact same game we do, and while few and far between, there are a few instances that show this run is possible. If this scene can improve, grow larger, and get more people at the top, if we can learn the game more, if we study, and if we try the best we can with the few opportunities we get, then I really do believe one day there will be some group to make the most legendary tournament run in this scene's history. But that story remains to be told, hidden behind a lot more work, and we aren't going to get there by giving up. And so, if you're in this scene, the next time you see our teams facing the odds, give them the best support that you can, because we are going to need it. Thanks for watching.